I've got a Prius. I've had a number of Prius, and they tend to go through the 12-volt battery. When the battery goes, the computer has trouble starting up when you first turn the car on. But the thing is that this 12-volt battery doesn't actually start the car. It just fires up the computer, and then after it's sort of pumped up the vacuum and done a few other things, the hybrid battery kicks in and it takes over, and the 12-volt battery does very little after that. So it doesn't need a big current capacity for the battery, and for years now I've replaced them with just a basic deep cycle battery, because even while it's not running, it tends to drain a bit on the 12-volt battery, and they do sort of have a bit of a hard life in that way. So it's time to replace the battery again, and I didn't want to put another lead acid in it, because I'm just sick of lead acid, because nowadays you've got the lithium iron phosphate, and they're just so much better. The only trouble is the Prius, the car itself, has a built-in charger and stuff. So I needed to test what the charger can do, and I needed to find out what would happen in a worst-case scenario if the battery was completely flat. So what I did was I flattened the battery, and I put it into the car, and I started the car, and I watched what happened with the amount of current, the amps that were flowing into the battery. And I noticed that it really spiked quite high. The battery itself, which is an eco-worthy 50 amp hour. Now it's not an expensive battery. I don't completely trust the BMS in it, the battery management system. So what I did is I discharged the battery, and I put it into the car, and I watched the amperage. So I put the battery in while it was flat. It doesn't show the current voltage. It was down at 11.8. Anyway, so that's the minimum voltage. That's crazy. Peak watts, almost 1,000 watts. Amps peak 68.9. So voltage minimum, no, that should have been lower. Okay. Anyway, so what's happened is that the batteries asked for too much power. The car's tried to provide 60 odd amps, and it's disconnected. So the power's back off. As soon as I turned the car back off, there was no power originally, and then the power reconnected by itself, and that's where it's at now. So all it's doing at the moment is it's running a few lights up there, and we're drawing 0 watts according to that. Well, that's not right. Oh, that's right, it's hooked up to measure charging current, not draw. And there we go. But the voltage was 11.63. So I've put almost 20 amp hours, or 269 watt hours into it, and I'm going to put it back in the car and see what happens. Alright, that's acceptable. So 35 amps. That's not bad at all. So that's with the battery a little bit under half charge, probably. It was through 13.3 volts, I think it was. So obviously it's got a fair bit more charge to go. So, I wonder what this car charges at. Wouldn't mind knowing that. Alright, so I put another battery on it, the battery that's already charged, and it charges at 14.4 volts. Which is no problem for a lithium battery. One of those, what's LiF, lithium phosphate. So what you didn't see was I was using this charger to put 20 amps into it, and it was at 14.1 volts, and it was pumping in 20 amps, and it probably got to, I saw it at 20 amp hours, and it went for quite a bit longer than that, so it was probably close to the 30 amp hours, which the total would be 50 amp hours. So it basically is filling itself right up. But this disconnected because obviously the BMS in the battery dipped out. And so I hooked it up to this one, which is much more controllable. And I had the voltage set to 14.6. And I even had it at 1 amp charging. And as soon as it got to the 14 point something volts up here or something like that, it would just cut out. So what I reckon is happening is the cells are out of balance in this, because it's been probably sitting in storage somewhere for a long time and the cells have gone out of balance maybe. I don't know. But anyway, what I've had to do is reduce the charge back to about 0.5 amp and just let it slowly creep up, and hopefully the balance in the BMS will balance out the cells and we'll see if we can reach. But basically I guess it's almost completely charged, but we should be able to hit 14.4 because otherwise it won't work in the car. It'll just keep kicking out all the time. So we'll see if we can creep it up and get it to balance. I wouldn't be able to tell whether the cells are balancing unless I rip the top off of it and have a look, which I have done to other batteries, and you can put your own balancer in them and possibly fix it, but I'll see what I get to. Just giving it a very slow trickle up to the 14.4, and it's creeping up there now, but what seems to happen is as soon as it hits 14.4 it just drops and doesn't charge. I don't know, I'll put another battery on soon and see if that's a typical characteristic, but and I think then I'll just stick it in the car and see what happens. So this is the characteristics of another battery. Very, very different. So it winds it up to 14.4 and then just starts to screw back the amps, which is normal. That's what most batteries will do. But this new battery from EcoWorthy doesn't work like that, which is really strange. But maybe that's just how it is. I don't know. We'll have to put it in a car and see what happens. Yeah, look at this one. As it gets towards the end of its charge, see, I've put, it just went off 72 watt hours into it. So that's the way I'd expect a battery to respond. And it just keeps trickling up towards that charge point. So the battery was discharged after the last bit of testing that I did when I was giving it a load. So it's now charging from the car at 14, and it's putting a charge of, oh god, what's that, maybe 35 amps into it, which is respectable at the moment. So that voltage is just going to slowly go up, and I'm thinking this is going to work. So this is awesome. It's regulating not much above 14 volts. It's sort of just climbing at the moment, but the amps are dropping very fast. So we're down 15 amps. So once again, looking very promising. I am going to be putting a circuit breaker, a 60 amp circuit breaker in there, so you know, that'll protect the battery. And yeah, look at it now. Just in the time I've been doing that, just dropping. That's very promising. Hopefully it doesn't disconnect altogether, but we'll see how it goes. So it didn't take very long, and it dropped down to 0, and it did it around 14.5 volts. It just basically, it was at about 5 amps charging, and then it just went, okay, that's enough. So I don't know whether the BMS inside has just disconnected at that voltage, The voltage range on the side of the battery says that 14.6 is the high range, so it's certainly within that. And I think just as long as when I turn the car off, the battery connects quick enough to keep everything running, and I'll try that, and I reckon she'll be right. And all good. So I just watched the interior light, and the interior light dimmed quickly. It dropped back quickly to 13.5 volts, as you can see there, and this meter is now below zero because it's draining from the battery just to run whatever the car's using in this time. So I think we'll just drive the car and see what happens. I got a new multimeter so I could have Bluetooth. So as soon as I started it, I could see the current, sorry. And the current was only 37 amps peak. And very quickly, it's only been like 1 minute. I just started the car and then hopped out and had a look. And as you can see, it's 24.5 and going down. So the lithium battery's fine. It's oh, by the way, I've got the lithium battery under that cover with the circuit breaker on it, so it's got a 60 amp circuit breaker on it. So she's all protected anyway. But anyway, I'm happy to run a lithium battery as the 12 volt start battery without any concern. I forgot to say that this car had been sitting for 3 days, 4 days maybe, before I started it, so I'd given it time for the battery actually to drop a bit. There is one situation where there could be a problem, and it wouldn't be a problem because the circuit breaker's in there, and that is if the battery went very, very flat. But in my experience, I've had an auxiliary lithium battery sitting in this car for a very long time, and the auxiliary battery was hooked in parallel with the existing battery because the existing battery was getting bad. And in that time, I never had an issue with the lithium battery being too flat and sucking, because it had a 20 amp fuse in the circuit, and it never popped that fuse, so it's always been good.